I think so, yeah. Is it 3 o'clock on the dot? We go by the dot.
It's actually 3:01.
All right. All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. If y'all have a seat, please. If you'll take a seat. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a joint meeting today between the Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee that I chair and the Resource Management Special Committee. Of course, this is not our EUT regular meeting room. I don't know where Chairman will meet with his, but this is not our normal meeting room. We want to meet in here so there'd be plenty of room. Looks like there is. For our committee, EUT, of course, we deal with energy and Public Service Commission, utilities, and then also telecommunications. So there are a lot of things that these two committees share and the information that they need to get together. And Chairman Thomas mentioned to me last year, I think it was, that he thought it'd be good for us to have an opportunity, for members to have an opportunity to have energy providers and Public Service Commission come in and tell us how they fit into this whole scenario of providing electricity and what they do and how they all interface together. And I think it's a really good idea, and I appreciate him mentioning that. And then it just fits right into what he'll tell you what he's been commissioned to do and what his committee's been commissioned to do. With that, if I may, I'll call on Representative Anderson to lead us in a word of prayer to start us off with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If everybody will please bow with me. Dear kind and Heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, for another day on this beautiful earth, God, that you created, Lord. We look around us at the resources, God. We look at the state we live in. We look at the way you've blessed us, each and every one of us in our lives, God. We thank you for that. God, we pray over the proceedings of this committee, this legislative body, and we ask your discernment and your guidance. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for that. And with that, the only thing I would like to say before we get started, we have several speakers, and it's my intention, Chairman Thomas may have other ideas on this, but it's my intention to let the speakers have their say. They've been allotted so much time to do that, and then save questions for the end, because otherwise we'll get tied up on one speaker and others won't get to speak. Is that okay with you?
I would say we are very much in alignment in that.
Okay. With that, Chairman Thomas.
Thank you. So we obviously opening it up for our special committee on resource management. This is a very exciting special committee. I'm very thankful to the speaker for pulling this together. This is a forward-looking committee. That means we're looking at policy 10 to 20 years out. And what I tell everybody all the time, in order for us to figure out, it's kind of like your GPS on your phone. You have to tell it where you're going before, it has to know where you are and where you're going before it can figure out the route to get there. And this is a primer. I've worked with Chairman Parsons, and we've asked the EMCs and the utility providers, the PSC, to come in and talk a little bit about where we are in Georgia, how we got to where we are. And it's really, I believe, going to be a great primer for everyone. But we've got some big demands coming to this state. We've got some, and we have responsibilities to the citizens to make sure that they have, access to plenty of drinking water, power, and obviously we have partners and the PSC and take care of the power piece of it. But there is the water piece as well. I'll be working with Chairman Smith and on the water piece of it, and I'm very grateful for you, and looking forward to doing one of these with your committee as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get moving. We have Jason Shaw, with Chairman Shaw with the PSC to give the first presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Parsons, and members of the committee, and all the folks that are here today. We appreciate the opportunity, first of all, to just kind of start out as an introduction for the first meeting of the special committee. And I don't want to bore you, because most people here know what the PSC is, but I do want to kind of give a high level view and just kind of go over, what it is that that we do. To start with, the basics, the PSC is a 5-member body elected statewide. We're considered quasi-legislative for rulemaking and quasi-judicial for hearings and conducting hearings and binding decisions. We got about 87 employees, pretty small agency. We're housed over here on the Washington Street side, right above the cafeteria, and we got the first and the second floor there, and would love and encourage y'all to come visit us anytime. We had about 106 or 7 employees before the Great Recession, so we're still, pretty lean. Primarily, we're made up of analysts, engineers, and attorneys, and then in our facilities protection unit, our inspectors and investigators. We've got 4 main units. We've got our electric unit, natural gas unit, telecom unit, and facilities protection unit, and also our renewables and energy efficiency unit. We all know, I think a lot of y'all share my feelings that a capitalistic economy it works well. Competition keeps prices low, but that's really what's different about monopolies and utilities. It doesn't operate that way. You can't have 3 natural gas companies running their lines on the same right-of-way. You can't have 3 electric providers running down Peachtree Street or a rural highway. It doesn't make sense, so it's done differently. So what the PSC does is we regulate the investor-owned utilities in the state, and that therefore we set a reasonable profit margin for those investor-owned utilities, and we set prices to allow recovery of what is reasonable and prudent cost. I assume that we're here mainly today to talk about power. We all know what we're dealing with in this country and in this state with regards to the unprecedented load growth that we're dealing with. And I won't bore you today and talk about us regulating payphones, because there's not many of those left. Not many landline telephones left. But our telecom unit has been more involved in dealing with the broadband side with your help, and we're proud of what's happening. As a product of rural Georgia, I can tell you I'm proud of the amount of rural fiber that's been installed in this state the last few years because of y'all's leadership. Every 3 years, we analyze and set Georgia Power's integrated resource plan. We call it the IRP. Georgia Power just filed their 3-year IRP last Friday on the 31st. This is going to be an unprecedented case because of what I mentioned with the load growth. The IRP is basically, I think it's our secret sauce. I think it's what sets Georgia apart from a lot of other states, and we are somewhat of the envy of the nation with regards to the IRP process, which is our way of looking long-term with resource planning. And that is because the State House of Representatives in 1991 or 92, I believe, a young man named Boyd Pettit, that many of y'all know around this place, was the one that carried that bill, and I think it's been, like I said, our secret sauce ever since. That's a 20-year outlook. Statutorily, y'all tell us to do that every 3 years, so 3-year updates to a 20-year plan. And that case, like I said, just got filed Friday. We'll start 4 days of hearings in late March, 4 days of hearings in May, rebuttal hearings in in June, and a final decision in mid-July. So it's a very complex case. I'll tell you, just the summary is 159 pages. The total filing so far, including all trade secret information, is 2,280 pages. About 800 and something pages of that is just dealing with the transmission planning that's taking place. So it's very broad. I'd say by the end of that case, by the time you end up with all the transcripts and the hearings and all the data requests, there was 48 data requests, averaging about 20 questions per request in the 22 IRP. Add all that together, there'll be some 4,200 or so pages of information. Y'all are welcome to come over and help us decipher that. But no, our staff is really, really working hard already to decipher that and get prepared. Our staff and their consultants will be preparing their testimony based on all that. So it is a very, very complex process, and we've got a lot in front of us right now. As far as we don't regulate the EMCs and the munis, but we work very closely with them. They do a great job. Just like Georgia Power, this resource planning that we've done here is the reason why. I'll just tell you, in Winter Storm Elliott, in the Christmas storm a couple of years ago, we were the only system in Georgia that did not have rolling blackouts around us. TVA, Duke Carolinas, Florida Power and Light, everybody had rolling blackouts except our electric providers here in Georgia. So that sort of speaks for itself with regards to how this long-range planning and we set the reserve margins for winter and summer peak events during this process, deal with generation, deal with this whole clean energy transition that we've been going through, and it's a really good process. As far as the mixture on the generation, right now Georgia Power, I'm gonna mainly speak about Georgia Power since that's who we regulate, but we're 41% natural gas fuel source, 18% coal, 14% nuclear. If someone could move to that next slide. And 14% nuclear, 20% renewables, mainly solar, but hydro, solar, biomass, and wind. I think it's important to mention that in 2013, thank you, that in 2013, Georgia had almost no solar energy. That year, the PSC asked Georgia Power to add 525 megawatts of solar to the grid under the leadership of Commissioner Bubba McDonald. By the third quarter of last year, Georgia had 7,281 megawatts of installed solar, making us 7th in the nation for installed solar energy. I'd like to note that we did that without any state subsidies and without tax credits. There are credits on the federal level, but there are no mandates and no credits from state taxpayers. Solar has proven that it works in this free market economy. Our EMCs are also investing heavily in solar and just basically leading the country in terms of that as well through their Green Power EMC division. That said, it's important to point out that the difference between solar and baseload energy. When people flip a switch, they need the lights to come on. Battery storage has been a big piece of it's going to be a big piece in this IRP. It was a big piece in the IRP update that we had last year. The technology's evolving, but still, when you combine solar with battery energy storage system, you still got limits. You've got these battery technology that's evolving. You got 2-hour batteries and you got 4-hour batteries, but you still got to have base load power. Vogtle Units 3 and 4 being the first 2 nuclear units built in the United States in over 30 years is a big deal for us, and it's one of the reasons why Georgia's got the capacity we've had, and we've been able to so far meet the growing needs of our state. Of course, we're dealing with unprecedented load growth now that we're going to need more. Energy prices in this country have gone up about 30%. That's higher than even groceries. Now we see all this in our power bills. We see it when we go to the grocery store. You see it when you go to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's with my wife Sunday. It was $18 for 2 sausage egg McMuffins and 2 drinks. We're seeing it across the board with everything, and energy is not immune to inflation. I'd say the biggest challenge we've had, I'll just put it this way with y'all. We've basically had a perfect storm of increases when you factor in Vogtle, fuel cost increases, and just inflation overall. We had when Unit 3 went into commercial operation, that's when we had that case, put those rates into the rate base, and then when Vogtle 4 went into it. But the single largest increase that Georgia Power customers have absorbed was from the fuel case that we had in 2022, I believe. Yes. So fuel costs are a pass-through, and that's by law. So the utility does not earn a return on fuel cost. So when we have a fuel case and they file that, you're either over or under recovered since the prior case. To put that in perspective, in my first year on the commission in 2019, we had a fuel case. Natural gas prices were low, stable. We had a over recovery, so we were able to credit customers' bills that year. Fast forward 3 years when they filed the fuel case, we were dealing with an unprecedented $1.6 billion under recovery in fuel costs. Natural gas in 23 and in 20 and 21, mostly in 22, the right before that case, had spiked from $2.50 or so a decatherm to up to $9 in places. That alone, when you go back and you look at how reliant you are on natural gas for a fuel source, that was a heavy hit. That was about a $16 increase on the average customer's bills. Just that alone. The only thing we were able to do is claw back some of that original filing based on some of the unplanned outages that we were able to capture from some of the generation sources. But it was shocking. It was tough. Fuel costs I'm happy to say, have stabilized, and when we have another fuel case next year, hopefully we'll be in a better situation. According to the U.S. Energy and Information Administration, the average natural gas prices, like I said, spiked hard in 22 and 2023. I'm going to touch a little bit on Plant Vogtle. I've already spoke about it a little bit, but we've got these 2 nuclear plants producing enough clean energy for 1 million homes and businesses for the next. That's a resource that's a 60 to 80 year resource. Those projects came in way over budget. That's no secret. We've all seen what happened with Vogtle after the Westinghouse bankruptcy. I'm happy to say that we forced Southern Company stockholders to absorb a large piece of those overruns. In the final prudency case that we had, that we were able to reach a stipulated agreement with the utility, and it wasn't just the PSC and our staff, but we had a record number of other interveners to sign on to that stipulation, some that I see here in the room, like the Southern Environmental Law Center and Georgia Watch and others. I think we struck a really good deal for the ratepayers. Georgia Power, our Southern Company shareholders, absorbed about $3 billion in that settlement. And that's on top of about another $3 billion total if you go back and look at what we had been able to do in the finance side and a stipulation back when the project was decided to continue after the Westinghouse bankruptcy. How do we set rates? We have rate cases about every 3 years. That's not statutory, but they can file a rate case, and it's been about 3 years since we've had a rate case. So when they do, we open a docket just like we do with the IRP, and it's basically a court case. Georgia Power and our attorneys, we present one side. Our PSC, we divide our staff into 2 parts. We have our public interest advocacy staff that presents the other side. We'll have I think we had 24 interveners in the last rate case. Each of the interveners can put up their own expert witnesses and cross-examine all the other witnesses. And the commissioners are basically acting as the judge. I like to say we're sort of like the judge and the jury. There are filings, analysts, documents, expert witnesses, cross-examination, several public hearings over about a 6-month period, and then we have to make a decision. In the last rate case, the initial request by Georgia Power was to raise prices based on their revenue requirement of about $2.9 billion. After months of analysis in a full case, and expert testimony and cross-examination, we were able to reduce that original ask by about 40%. So the cost to the ratepayers was very minimal compared to what it could have been, even though it was right bad enough as it was. I've mentioned Vogtle enough, but also, just as far as some recent news, I want to talk a little bit about what we've just gone through with these recent rules and regulations changes that you've probably heard a little bit about recently. And basically, as a result of what we're dealing with, like I said, the unprecedented load growth, which is primarily driven by data centers and large load customers like that. We're dealing with a different level of large load customers we've never had to deal with in the past. If you go back a few years ago, the only Georgia Power customer that was over 100 megawatts, there was one of those over in Augusta. Now we're seeing large load customers with 100 megawatts and greater just coming in droves. Not all of them are data centers, but obviously most of them are data centers. So we have been working pretty much since Georgia Power came to us in October of 23 with the surprise announcement of how fast this load was growing and driven by this artificial intelligence world that we're moving into. Everything has happened so fast. It's just been amazing. And so we had to do an IRP update, and we voted on that in April of last year, and we had to add megawatts to keep the lights on. And then that's unprecedented for us to have to open up a generation case outside the normal 3-year process. So we've added a good bit of generation. But these new rules will help us to deal with these large load customers. My fear is let's just take a data center, for instance. They're basically warehouses full of computers, air conditions, and they use a lot of electricity and a lot of water. Well, we all know that computers and servers can become obsolete pretty quick, so my fear and others, just like I share with the utilities, is what if one of these data centers and you've spent all this investment to be able to serve that customer with generation, transmission, and distribution, in 5 years from now, another state says, oh, we're going to offer them a better deal. Well, they could just pick up and move. And we're stuck holding that bill because large load customers in the past, traditionally, you had a 3 to 5 year contract. So this will allow, these new changes will allow us to look out 12 and 15 years on these contracts. So even if they up and leave, they're stuck to a contract where they've got to continue to pay for their share of those costs. It also allows us, not in addition to just looking at longer term contracts, but we'll look more at performance and credit provisions, minimum bill provisions, and contract termination provisions. So that was something we just recently did, and I think it's a great step, but it's really a first step because this world that we're in and this load growth and this is not slowing down. We don't see it slowing down anytime in the near future, so we feel like we're going to need to continue to be flexible and continue looking at ways to protect, particularly protecting our residential and small business rate class of customers. I mentioned battery energy storage systems. It's going to be a big way to tackle this issue because we've got a lot of solar on the system, and by coupling battery energy storage systems with that will be huge. In the 22 IRP, we added 765 megawatts of battery storage. In the 2023 IRP update that we voted on last year, we added another 1,000 megawatts of battery storage, and the most recent storage facility that's been completed is the Mossy Branch facility down in Shiloh, Georgia. That went online in October. So I'm going to just kind of wrap up from there. Happy to answer questions. I don't know if you want me to wait till afterwards, but I hope I've given you sort of an overview to start the process with this special committee. We look forward to participating. Again, our door is open. We know that a lot of folks are getting questions about Georgia Power rates and rates across the board. We want to just we're a phone call away. I'd love the opportunity to go into more depth. We've got staff here, I call him the smartest person in the building, but Tom Bond. Tom, raise your hand. He's our utilities director. Reese McAllister is our executive director. Tom Kraus, that y'all know, is back here somewhere. We're right here across the street, so I'd love to talk to you more and get more into the weeds about what we do. As I said, we regulate natural gas and landline telephones and pipeline safety, and we appreciate the opportunity and the ability that y'all give us to do our job. We feel like we do a good job at it. We're pretty much the envy of the South in terms of capacity and reliability, and our rates are competitive, but we need to give our ratepayers a break. Inflation, we've had enough inflation. We want to, like I said, I'll stick around and answer some questions later, but thank y'all for the opportunity to do this and come before you. And we look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee throughout this entire process. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Chairman Sherrill. We appreciate that very much. That's exactly what we were looking for. I don't know if you can stick around, Chairman, but if not, either you or somebody from the commission could stick around for questions. We're going to hold questions till after, otherwise we're going to get bogged down. I mean, you know exactly what would happen. So we're going to move on. I don't have, who is next? Who? Okay, bear with me here. I don't have the agenda here in front of me. Well, we'll just go ahead and call on, I think we ought to call on Georgia Power next. Is that, who we got up here?
Coweta,
There you
Georgia
are.
EMC.
All right, AMCs, they beat me to the punch. That's okay.
Chairman Parsons, good afternoon, members of both the Special Resource Management Committee and the House Energy and Utilities Telecommunications Committee. My name is Chris Stevens. I'm the president and CEO of Coweta Fade EMC, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys today. And I'm speaking on behalf of Georgia EMC, our statewide trade association. Georgia EMC represents 41 Georgia distribution electric cooperatives, Oglethorpe Power, Georgia Transmission, and Georgia System Operations. And today I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the good news of the electric cooperatives, but also going to be talking about something we often take for granted, and that's Georgia's electric system, which safely delivers reliable and affordable power to homes and businesses all across the state of Georgia, and how EMCs play a critical role in that. So you might ask, what is an electric cooperative and why do we exist? An electric cooperative is a private, not-for-profit electric utility owned and governed by the members it serves. We do not have shareholders like a traditional IOU. And then going back to the 1930s, approximately 90% of American homes in rural areas did not have access to electricity. And this was a substantial problem. How could you participate in the economy at the time without access to electricity? And Franklin Roosevelt saw this firsthand right here in rural Georgia when he would visit Warm Springs. And he saw this be problematic, especially for farmers who struggle to produce their products without the use of electricity. As a result, he created the Rural Electrification Administration in 1935. And what the REA did, it provided low-cost loans for those providers who were willing to serve into the rural areas. Unfortunately, at the time, none of the electric providers took them up on the offer, so in 1936, Congress adopted the Electric Cooperative Corporation Act, which created the electric membership corporations. And in 1937, this body, the Georgia General Assembly, followed suit by enacting the Electric Membership Corporation Act. So before we talk about the current electric market of Georgia, I want to kind of give a background and talk about how we got here and why your predecessors took action 50 years ago to change it. You know, prior to the adoption of today's structure, it was kind of like the Wild West. There were really no rules, and basically electric providers raced to construct new services to connect customers to grow market share. This led to redundant distribution lines, inefficient allocation of resources, and certainly dangerous situations. It was reported in some cases that others actually cut each other's lines. So in 1973, the General Assembly decided to bring structure to the electric system with the passage of the Georgia Territorial Electric Service Act, which I will refer to simply as a Territorial Act. Legislators who debated the statute will tell you that it was one of the most vetted and consequential pieces of legislation they ever considered during their careers. Ultimately, the Territorial Act was signed into law by then Governor Jimmy Carter. So the Territorial Act, it divided the entire state into 94 electric service territories, and I'll show you a map of that in the next slide. These territories created a defined market for each of the designated electric providers with the obligation that they serve all the customers in that territory with some limited exceptions. And those exceptions are, one, the large load or customer choice provision, which allows any new customer, any new load coming in to connect with 900 kW or greater. Think of a public shopping center of something or larger, has a one-time choice of electric provider. And this exception has greatly benefited our economic development, as many states across the country do not offer the customer choice provision for economic development recruits. And the second exception is the quarter rights, and this is a little more complicated, but simply put, if an electric service provider's line extended prior to 1973, they can still serve customers within several hundred foot of that line, protecting their investment that they made before the passage of the Territorial Act. So what does the Territorial Act do, and how has it benefited Georgians for 50 years? The Territorial Act does three basic things. One, it ensures reliable and safe and affordable electricity. It avoids duplication of utility facilities, thus reducing utilities costs to consumers. And because of the creation of the defined service territories, it allows electric providers to perform long-term planning. And this is critical. Understanding your service area is critical in planning. You understand the growth and the development in the service area and the geographical region you serve, and then that allows you to make system improvements which can take many, many years to implement. So this structure really values not only the facilities, but it facilitates reliability and also values reliability. As a result, Georgia's residential rate average overall, although high considering where we've been, it's still 14 cents a kilowatt hour compared to the nationwide average of around 17 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can see Georgia's rates on average are 17% lower than the national average. The second thing the Territorial Act did is protects consumers. It provided non-discriminatory rates and terms. It fosters relative stable rates. And it also requires the electric provider to provide service to all the customers within the service territory, even those hard-to-reach areas like rural farms in Georgia. And remember, this is why EMCs were established, to serve the challenging to serve. And finally, it promotes economic development. This is a critical element for an audience such as yourself, the policymakers. If you talk to the Georgia Economic Development, they will tell you the customer choice provision is one of the leading factors in their success. It also ensures a level of certainty for utilities who are investing billions in generation and transmission assets to meet the state's growing needs. The Territorial Act has clearly delivered for the state of Georgia. For over the past 50 years, our population has over doubled and job creation's more than tripled. And not to mention that we've been ranked the #1 state for business for the past 11 years and counting. So sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so this is a kind of a busy graph, but this is a map of the service territories. And you can see in the red is the areas served by the 41 distribution co-ops in Georgia. Overall, we serve a little over 4.4 million Georgians, almost 3/4 of the land area. We're serving 157 of 159 counties, mostly rural in nature, and our line density is about a little less than 12 meters per mile compared to the IOU of about 36 meters per mile. And also in this area, you can see the areas in white are served by Georgia Power, the blue is the MEAG cities, and then the yellow-orange color is unassigned territory. It's more like military bases such as Fort Moore, Fort Stewart, and so forth. So this graphic shows how the electric utilities or electric co-ops are structured in Georgia. From the top left hand, you can see starts with our power generation that is largely handled by Oglethorpe Power with the help on renewables from Green Power EMC. And then that energy is then transmitted via Georgia Transmission to 38 of the 41 distribution co-ops. It's important to note 3 of the most northern co-ops in the state of Georgia receive their transmission and generation services through Tennessee Valley Authority. And then Georgia System Operation actually manages and controls the transmission and generation assets on behalf of the EMCs, effectively delivering those electrons to the distribution co-ops who can then deliver it to the end user. And then in the bottom left is our statewide trade association, Georgia EMC, who represents all of the participants, including the 3 TVA co-ops. So you may ask, where do we get our power from? And so the answer really is from a variety of sources, but primarily, as you can see, Oglethorpe Power, who we formed, the EMCs formed in 1974 after the passage of the Territorial Act, delivered in 2023 nearly 70% of our energy needs. The second most area that we got our energy from was through supplemental contracts that many of us have participated in. And then you can see Green Power, Southeastern, SEPA makes up roughly 5%, and other renewables and supplemental contracts, small RMC make up the balance. So as I mentioned earlier, the Territorial Act is critical for our long-term planning. But in addition to that, the federal government requires Oglethorpe Power to submit a load forecast on an annual basis. Each year, 38 member co-ops submit a 10-year demand and energy forecast to OPC. OPC aggregates this data and basically develops an official load forecast, which is used to estimate our summer and winter peak demands in energy. It also helps determine the total generation and transmission needs, but also then the development of operating reserves. And finally, what it's important to note here is when we talk about the load forecast, this does not include any speculative loads. It's only loads that are under contract or native load growth. So I know this body is very aware of the growth that Georgia's experienced and is continuing to see. And so that has a lot to do with the favorable business climate we have here, the skilled workforce, and of course, the sound political leadership. And due to the growth in the state, EMCs need more electricity and more capacity. And as a result, in 2024, Oglethorpe Power initiated a process to build 2 new generation assets, one in Talbot County and one in Monroe County. These 2 units combined will be a $2.1 billion investment in Georgia's energy future. And as the map indicates, these 2 additional resources are in addition to the 16 existing Oglethorpe generation assets already in service today. In this map, it's an integrated transmission system. This is another key advantage Georgia has over our neighboring states. And simply put, the high voltage transmission lines deliver the energy from the generating units to the distribution utilities who deliver it to the end user. And in distinct parts, the 18,000 miles of the ITS, the integrated transmission system, are owned and operated by 3 major providers: Georgia Transmission, Georgia Power, and MEAG, and the Dalton Utilities also owns a small portion of that. The ITS is jointly planned and operated by all of these electric utilities providers that I just mentioned. Instead of having multiple grids like many states, we have one which eliminates redundancy and increases efficiency, which again ultimately saves Georgians money. All providers can use any other provider's transmission line to transmit power from one source to another. And also, the ITS plays a critical role in facilitating customer choice loads. Any ITS member can take service out of another's ITS substation instead of having to build duplicated, redundant, very expensive facilities. So as I mentioned earlier, we're regulated by our members, by a member-elected board of directors. And this regulatory model has proven very effective in managing costs that ultimately charge to our members in their rates. While the PSC doesn't operate or regulate us in the same way they do Georgia Power, we do interface with them on a regular basis. And those 2 ways that we interface with them, the Georgia Code provides that the Public Service Commission approve any long-term loan longer than 12 months, and that's done on a relatively routine basis. Last year alone, 27 EMCs had loans approved. In fact, Coweta Fed EMC just had our most recent 3-year work plan construction loan approved just 2 weeks ago. And the other area was passed by this body in 2020, and it was establishing the pole attachment rates for any other utility who wishes to attach to an EMC-owned pole, that the Public Service Commission set the rates, terms, and conditions. And that rate case will be reviewed every 5 years, and so we're up for a review later this year, for sure, early in 2026. So as this body begins its important mission, it is critical to put a few things in perspective. Here in Georgia, we're extremely fortunate to live in a growing and dynamic state where the citizens have an abundant economic opportunities. This is in part to this body's great leadership and in our effective and efficient electric market. You don't have to take my word for it. You can simply have to look at the facts. Georgia's paid the 11th lowest power rates in the nation, and because of our time-proven market structure, we also have one of the most resilient and reliable grids in the nation. And so, with good rates, good reliability, at the end of the day, what do our members think about us? Well, we think that surveys really benefit us in that data. So you can see here, many EMCs participate in member surveys, and J.D. Power actually surveys all the co-ops with 100,000 members or more across the country. And you can see from this graph that 6 of the top 12 nationally are right here in Georgia. And many of us, Coweta Fed included, actually participating in the American Consumer Satisfaction Index. And you can see the list here co-ops is generally rank a little bit higher than other traditional type of utilities with a 78. And I'm pleased to say that Coweta Fayette EMC is ranked in the top 5 nationally in the past 2 years with a score of 90 in 2023 and most recently in 24 with a score of 89. So at the end of the day, yes, we do believe our members are satisfied with their service. So as I wrap up, if you talk and you look at all the 41 distribution co-ops mission statements, you'll see a very common theme, that we exist to safely deliver reliable and affordable electricity to our members. And that's why we were formed, and that we're still true to that core mission today. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. If you don't mind, if you could stick around, we're going to take questions at the end. There could be questions for you.
Yes, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. It was very informative. Appreciate it. I'm going to call on the MEAG Power, Electric Cities of Georgia. I think Paul Warfel and Daryl Ingram are coming up.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Parsons, Chairman Thomas, committee members. Certainly very pleased to be able to be in front of you, talk to you a little bit about MEAG, about the communities in Georgia who have their own electric systems, and happy the committees are looking at paths forward that make sense for Georgia. I'm Paul Warfel. I'm the Vice President, Participant in External Affairs for MEAG Power. With me is Daryl Ingram. He's the Senior Vice President and COO for Electric Cities of Georgia. I'm going to be just talking specifically about the wholesale power from MEAG Power, and then of course Daryl will get up afterwards. He'll talk about ECG and the services that ECG, as well as the cities, what they do for their communities and serving distribution power to their communities. I will say, MEAG Power, there's 52 electric cities in Georgia. 49 of those are part of MEAG. So all 52 are members of ECG. And so we have the 49 that are part of MEAG Power, 48 cities in one county. And so I know oftentimes folks refer to the electric cities as MEAGs, but I do want to just point out that there are a few electric cities anyway that are not a part of MEAG. So looking at the history, if we look at the history, when the cities took it upon themselves to really try and improve the quality of life, security and safety in their communities, they saw good things going on in the big cities. There was electric systems being developed, and of course in the small cities there were not investors that were going to be taking the time and their money to invest in those smaller communities. And so they took it upon themselves. They said, we are going to invest in our communities. It's what's right for our people to provide a sense of security, provide convenience. So in the late 1890s, late 1800s, some of them were in the 1880s, and the early 1900s, the cities started getting in the business. And so most of our members started serving their cities with electricity during those early times. And during those times, you can see a few pictures here from a few of our members, Albany, Lawrenceville, and Noonan. They set up small generators to provide those street lights, to provide streetcar service in those early years. And of course, as their communities grew, they had to expand beyond that. They could no longer serve their customers with power from these local generators, and had to hook onto the grid as it developed over time. But the one thing that I will say, having these visionary leaders in our cities, of course, like I said, there's only 52 cities in Georgia that have their own electric systems. There's 10 times that number of cities in Georgia. So these cities really stand out in terms of having that vision, creating a tool for their communities, not only to be safe and secure and have a quality of life, but also to have control over economic development. I mean, it's a huge tool for communities to try and drive jobs in their communities over time. And so through the decades, of course, Georgia grew, they grew, and they've been very successful through the years. So you get into the 1970s. The 1970s is when just the circumstance of the time, energy crisis was going on. There were several circumstances that were taking place in terms of just an uncertain future in terms of power supply. And the city said, well, we need to take control into our own hands. And so they petitioned the state of Georgia to create an entity that would serve their interest only. And that entity that was created by the General Assembly was MEAG Power, the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia. As you see here, we're a not-for-profit, we're a public corporation, an instrumentality of the state of Georgia. Our purpose is to provide a reliable, economical source of wholesale power. We have, like I said earlier, 48 cities and 1 county, and we're governed by a 9-member volunteer board comprised of residents from MEAG Power's communities who are elected by the participant communities for 3-year staggered terms. In terms of MEAG Power, we all know it because it's here in Georgia. It's what we see here in Georgia. But there are entities like MEAG all around the country. Almost every state has an organization similar to MEAG that's serving the interests of public power communities around their states. So I just want to kind of give a little perspective and context there. MEAG Power is one of the largest of those what we call joint action agencies, and of course called joint action because the cities came together to determine their own future and have a wholesale provider that they had control over. So just to have a pictorial of where MEAG provides power, our wholesale power. You see a list of the cities as well as a map. The one county, of course, is Crisp County. It's just a dot. We should have probably shaded in that whole county, but that is our one county, Crisp County. And I'll say that the one thing that I think is a characteristic of this group of communities is how diverse they are. There's urban, there's suburban, there's rural communities. Our largest members are City of Marietta, City of Albany. They have their own power systems and provide their communities. Our smallest member is the town of Brinson. I imagine there's at least one house member that knows where Brinson is. But it's a small town near Bainbridge. It's got 214 residents. A very small community, but they have their own power system. I think their largest customer may be an irrigation pump, but they're a very important community and do the same thing for their community that much larger communities do as well. So moving on, just looking at MEAG Power's energy profile, and actually I'll start with capacity. There's a very distinct difference between capacity whenever you talk about the steel on the ground. What is the maximum output of all your steel on the ground that produces electricity? You see kind of what that makeup is for MEAG. It's a very diverse split between the different major fuel sources. You can see that we have a big chunk of nuclear, coal, natural gas, and the hydro comes from the Southeastern Power Administration, which is a federal agency actually headquartered in Elberton, Georgia. And they're very proud of that. If you talk to Mayor Graves in Elberton, he'll tell you all about the Southeastern Power Administration. But what I wanted to show is what MEAG Power's generation is and how that compares to what that actually turns into whenever we run that generation over a 1-year period. And so over a 1-year period, 2024, you see on the right there what our actual delivered energy was. So we had those generation assets. We ran them based on market conditions. No surprise, nuclear ran all out almost all the time. Therefore, it's 56% of our energy profile. Conversely, you can see coal, even though it's 21% of our capacity, only provided about 5% of our power. So really the point I want to make there is even though coal is a decreasing, at least under current market conditions, has been a decreasing source of energy, the one thing that we have seen, especially in a time of growth, in a time of extreme weather from time to time, that asset has been tremendously valuable to the system. It's been the anchor to provide reliability for the system, increase voltage, keep voltage levels where it needs to be. And, you know, it's not a huge energy source, but it's as critical as ever on the system. And the last thing I'll mention on this slide, and you see in the bottom right there, and something that we're very proud of, is our non-emitting profile. You know, between our nuclear and hydro, 65% non-emitting energy since 2016. That puts us among the leaders in terms of non-emitting energy in the Southeast. And so that's something we're very proud of. We think it's something that positions our communities to be very successful in the future. So I know that we already went over the ITS, Integrated Transmission System. I'll just add a point of emphasis. Once again, this is a jointly planned, jointly utilized system that provides access around the state for all the utilities that are part of the ITS and their retail members. It's something that's unique to Georgia, and I just don't want it to go unnoticed what a valuable asset that is, not just for the utilities, but for the customers. It's efficient, it's reliable, and like I said, it provides access that allows customer choice to thrive and economic development to thrive in Georgia. I've actually had a neighboring state contact me because they were losing a lot of projects because of our customer choice provision, and they were trying to figure out how they could do the same thing and replicate it in their state. And once they figured out that we had an ITS that allowed that to work, I mean, they had no way to achieve that, and so they had to walk away. So I think that's something that's noteworthy, something we should be proud of. And so, just kind of in closing, before I asked Daryl to come up, I just wanted to pictorially show where MEAG operates versus our members. Of course, our members, they're the ones that serve the customers, serve the communities. MEAG Power is there to serve those communities. We are their organization, an extension of them through our elected board that's comprised of them. And so you can see MEAG Power, we generate, we transmit, so that our participants can take that power from the substation and then distribute it to their communities. And with that, I'll pass it on to Daryl Ingram.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon. Daryl Ingram, as Paul mentioned, with Electric Cities of Georgia and Chief Operating Officer with Electric Cities of Georgia. So Electric Cities of Georgia, as we kind of refer to as ECG in short, really its early beginnings started by its members in 1957, where a group of communities came together. We were later incorporated in 1973 and then reconstituted in 2009. We are an instrumentality of these 52 communities. As Paul mentioned, there are 49 that take their power, their wholesale power from MEAG Power. There are 3 others that are part of ECG. We're the trade association, for lack of a better word, that works. And I want to give you a little information about what we do and how we do it. We have a 9-member board that are elected from the membership. We are a not-for-profit organization. You can compare us to, under the Secretary of State's office, we're a Section 115 not-for-profit. The other 2 Section 115s that I'm aware of are ACCG and GMA. So we're in that same category in terms of the Secretary of State's office. We're again, being an instrumentality of these 52 communities, we provide a variety of services for them. We're kind of their expert consultants in working now on the distribution side, and I'll give you an idea of some of those things. In most cases, we design their electrical rates and their utility rates. We do their cost of service studies. We tell them when they're making money, when they're losing money. We do their electrical engineering. We manage their poles through pole management with all the people, that other entities that are on their poles. We do line worker training for them. We have 2 campuses, one in Adel, Georgia, one in Noonan, Georgia, and we're building a new state-of-the-art facility in the city of Forsyth, Monroe County. We have had a apprenticeship, U.S. Department of Labor apprenticeship program for over 30 years. So when our cities hire their line workers, we take them and then we train them. We train them from the beginning all the way to supervision in the organization. We also do statewide economic development. Paul mentioned that these 52 cities make up about 10% of municipalities in Georgia, but these municipalities pay ECG to do statewide economic development. When you look at the entities, and we're doing that with Georgia Power, with Georgia EMC, and with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. So we're trying to bring states, we're not just bringing projects into our communities, we're bringing them to wherever the needs of the prospect are. So if you really look at the way this model is set up to really what's stimulated by the Georgia Territorial Act, this collaboration that we have is unique in the country, very, very unique in the country. And so when we're working with projects, if we look at the big numbers that we're dealing with, that Paul just described at MEAG and what Georgia Power will describe and what Georgia EMC and Oglethorpe described, the big numbers are in the generation. And so if Georgia grows and does well, it's good for everybody. It's good for all of our partners. So that's why it's pretty noble, these 52 cities, 10% of the cities that do statewide economic development, and we show the whole state. We also do mutual aid coordination. When Helene just came through, we worked with our national organization, which is the American Public Power Association. We had crews from 21 states that we brought in working on the municipal systems across the state. We also monitor legislation and regulatory items as they appear. So when you look at public power communities in this country, we are not unique in Georgia. There are over 2,000 public power communities across the country, which represents providing electricity to 54 million people in the country and about 15% of the customers in the state. So we generate about $67 billion as a national organization with public power, just to give you some context. So when you look at Georgia, look at our public power communities, they own and operate their distribution systems. We're the small guy in the state. But as Paul mentioned, many of our communities started in the 1890s and most of them in 1904 when they got into the electric business. They generated their own electricity at that point until major and central generation stations came about in the 40s and 50s after the World War II. Then they became wholesale powers of Georgia Power. That changed in the 70s with the Territorial Act, when the cities brought the municipal bond market to the table to help fund Bogle, Wansley, Shera, Hatch, and many more of the plants in this state. We serve about 350,000 electrical customers through our cities in Georgia, and we are self-regulated. We are regulated by the people that are from our communities. So city councils, utility commissions that are appointed by the city councils, they are from the public in each community, and they are elected to these positions and regulate themselves. Our interaction with the Georgia Public Service Commission is municipals file their rates with the PSC on an annual basis. And you can see on the right in the pictorial that they own and operate these electrical distribution systems across the state. The Georgia Territorial Act, as the Act created 52 unique municipal territories, each utility in the state has a unique territory. And I'll give you a picture of one of the city of Douglas, for example, their territory. Their territory may be different than their city limits. It depends on what they negotiated initially with the Territorial Act when it came into in 1973 and 1974. The Georgia Public Service Commission, we also have 900 customer choice opportunities. We're very active in that space and competing for 900 customer choice activities. And then the Georgia Public Service Commission, we work with them if there are disputes around the Territorial Act. In closing, some of the benefits that we recognize of Georgia are the assigned territories really provide a large investment recovery model, very important to our utilities. As we mentioned earlier, the large numbers are in the generation. The obligation to serve was mentioned earlier by the gentleman from the EMC. This obligation to serve our territories is very important. Provides our customers reliability and affordability by having that obligation to serve their territories. The 900 kW competition stimulates economic development and affordability across the state. We think it's a huge plus for our state. And of course, the joint-owned generation assets and transmission assets, it was mentioned with ITS, motivates collaboration between all parties, especially in economic and community development. We all have teams of people that are working with communities in the state, and then we market Georgia around the world. The integrated transmission system provides joint ownership planning and customer reliability. All of that rolls down to each one of these communities and each one of the utilities. We feel like the Territorial Act was ahead of its time when it was created, and it still is, in our opinion. It stimulates risk-averse mindsets and protects our customer base, our customer rate bases, which is very important to each one of our communities. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Hang around, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Darrell. I should say Mr. Ingram and Paul, Mr. Wolfel. Thank you all for your presentation. And here again, we're going to save any questions. We have one more presenter, and that is Georgia Power. There they are. I'm getting up. It's okay.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. It's an honor to speak with you today. I'm Lee Evans, Director of Pricing and Rates for Georgia Power, where I oversee the design, calculation, administration, and application of our retail tariff, including the rules and regs that Commissioner Shaw mentioned earlier. I also oversee the territorial affairs and the application of the Territorial Act for the company. Jeff Grubb, Director of Resource Planning for Georgia Power, is also here should questions arise. We have heard a great deal of good information from the previous presenters on the Territorial Act, and I will try not to repeat these items. Okay. Georgia Power is a subsidiary of Southern Company, one of the largest energy companies in America, with electric and gas utilities, serving 9 million customers across 6 states with 44,000 megawatts of generating capacity. These utilities include Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, and Southern Company gas entities, including Atlanta Gas Light. Southern Power, our wholesale energy provider, with assets in 15 states of generating capabilities, and PowerSecure, the leading installer of advanced microgrids in the country. These nationwide resources and expertise are leveraged to provide clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy to our customers. Georgia Power's motto is a citizen wherever we serve. A citizen in service. Georgia Power serves nearly 2.8 million customers in Georgia across all but 4 of Georgia's 159 counties. We have been doing so for 123 years. And our 6,500 employees live and work in the communities throughout Georgia. From PTAs to chambers of commerce, we invest in our local communities, just as we do in powering the state. It is through this motto and these dedicated citizens and employees that we continue to help Georgia prosper. And to continue to reliably meet the needs of a growing Georgia, we must invest in the right kind of infrastructure to generate, transmit, and distribute energy statewide. By the virtue of Georgia Power being vertically integrated, regulated utility, we are wholly responsible for ensuring the reliability of our customers. Unlike other regions and markets in the country, this starts with our generating fleet. As shown on the right side, Georgia Power serves customers with 21,000 megawatts of generating capacity and has 136 generating units across approximately 40 sites in the state. The left chart shows the backbone of moving power, the transmission grid. In Georgia, we have an integrated transmission system, as we've heard today, the ITS, in which Georgia Power co-owns with the EMCs and municipalities. We plan, construct, operate, and maintain these 11,600 miles of transmission grid with these partners. This partnership ensures appropriate solutions are developed across the transmission system to reliably meet the power needs of Georgians. Now we'll look at a mix of the generating assets. The right chart shows our capacity mix. This represents machines on the ground and what they are capable of producing at a given time. Gas units, including combustion turbines and combined cycles, hydro units, coal units, nuclear units, and solar and battery units. 36% of these resources are carbon-free. This diverse fleet increases the reliability of the system and its resilience to respond to extreme conditions. We continue to make investments in our units that have benefited this system during extreme weather events. Now, which machines operate and how much they operate is on the left side with the energy mix. This is dictated by economic dispatch. That means we run the cheapest units first. Certain technologies, though, are not always available, like solar, so their production is limited. Other technologies, like nuclear, have very high availability, low fuel cost, and therefore they operate much more. These 2024 energy mix numbers shown here show 29% of the energy delivered came from nuclear. Now that only reflects 8 months of Vogtle Unit 4 online. And in 2025, we would expect that energy delivered from nuclear to be above 30%. Now, we've talked a lot about the Territorial Act today, so I'll try not to repeat some of these items. As we know, it defines the electric area for each electric provider in Georgia and dictates their obligation to serve. And that obligation of service is regardless of the cost or burden to serve that customer, regardless of the efficiency to serve that customer or build that line, or the counterparty risk that might exist. The Act was created to ensure the most economical and efficient rendering of retail electric service statewide, to prevent duplication of lines, to protect and conserve the investments of lines made by electric providers, and to advance the extension of lines in a way that is mindful of land use. These tenets still hold true today as they did back then. The Act does allow for customer choice, as has been covered here, which drives economic growth across the state. That growth and that customer choice opportunity exists for large industrial customers, commercial customers, including big box retailers and grocery stores too. And the major benefits of the Territorial Act are three: affordability, reliability, and future growth. The effective balance is realized through Georgia law and our regulatory structure. By enabling the efficiency of service and the deployment of infrastructure for the state as a whole, the Act facilitates affordable service, keeping costs down. The Act also allows electric suppliers to better plan for future growth, thus enabling greater reliability. The effective planning for the full electric system is incredibly complex, which I'll touch on later. The Southeast recently saw new load peaks during winter storms Elliott and Enzo. Georgia Power met the challenge of these storms and has consistently demonstrated a strong track record of reliability and timely restoration. The constructive planning required by the Territorial Act and the Integrated Resource Plan Act, along with our vertically integrated model, allow us to be successful during these events. And these low prices and reliable service lead to future growth. Georgia Power partners with the EMCs and MEAG, along with the state's Department of Economic Development, to attract and bring in new business to Georgia. The Territorial Act and the Customer Choice Provision is an important tool for attracting business to the state. It also provides assurance that Georgia will continue to grow and continue to be the #1 state to do business in. And that success has been a piece that has continued to drive our prices low. Electricity prices across the U.S. in recent years have rose, and Georgia Power is no different. However, we are consistently below the national average going back more than 30 years. Additionally, as Commissioner Shaw mentioned earlier, we heard concerns from the legislature and the PSC, which we began working on last summer to improve the rules and regulations around certain large customers. This allows for enhanced and continued protections and the realization of benefits from economic development for all customers. I've mentioned our regulatory structure a couple times here today. We are one of the most regulated industries and businesses in the country. But all electric providers are regulated, as we've heard. The MCs and municipalities are regulated by their customers, as is Georgia Power through the election of the Public Service Commission. Effective regulation enables our ability to provide that clean, safe, reliable, and affordable service. This oversight comes with nearly 200 regularly scheduled filings each year, with our key proceedings being accompanied by evidentiary hearings and expert witnesses from Commission staff, expert consultants, other interested parties, and Georgia Power. The volume of data requests is extraordinary. As Commissioner Shaw mentioned, we can have over 1,300 data requests in a single one of these key proceedings with over 20 intervening parties, well represented. These proceedings include the Integrated Resource Plan in accordance with the Integrated Resource Planning Act. This act and the filing establishes the lowest cost plan to ensure reliability and serve our customers. The base rate and fuel case then determine the recovery of prudently incurred costs based on that plan to set rates. We are mandated by law to plan and serve the state with robust regulatory oversight. We do it because it's required by law, and it is the best thing for our customers. As mentioned last week, we filed our Integrated Resource Plan, but we do a similar type of plan every year. We plan for the next 20 years every year. Every 3 years, as required by law, we file a comprehensive proposal consisting of thousands of pages. And as a vertically integrated utility, this plan is complex. It is complex because it has to ensure that we can reliably serve our customers for the next 20 years. There are 3 major components to this plan. Through energy efficiency and customer programs, we promote and incent the efficient and lowest cost use of energy. From there, we plan the most efficient and reliable generation and transmission system. The machines on the ground and the wires in the air are planned to serve the state in hundreds of thousands of weather scenarios, generating plant availability, load conditions, and transmission wires and infrastructure availability. All with the end result to have an efficient, cost-effective, reliable, and resilient electric system to meet our customers' energy needs. Our vertically integrated structure gives us many benefits, and our regulatory construct gives us many benefits. Other markets plan for wires and hope generation shows up. And when it doesn't, the lights go out. Businesses shut down, and the heat goes off. As we've seen in our neighboring states during some of these extreme conditions. This impacts businesses, the state's economy, and the health and safety of citizens. Our vertically integrated planning is special, enabled by Georgia law and the IRP Act and the Territorial Act. And through these laws and robust oversight, Georgia Power will continue to provide clean, safe, reliable, and affordable service. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Chairman Thomas, you want to kind of proceed here?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize. I've only had to be at 4 places at the same time today. So we've got a GDOT election going on. I had a bill to present. And of course, I tried to do everything I can to plan these as far in advance but that's just life. So I want to thank MEAG, Georgia Power, Georgia EMC. Is PSC still here? Hey, Chairman Shaw, thank you very much for putting this together. Like I said, the idea was to get a primer because we got to kind of figure out where we are, and I appreciate you all spending the time on that. We did want to give some time for questions. I think it probably best if the presenters, and I'm going to throw this out here, if everybody just walk up, maybe it would be easier just to kind of manage it that way than having people walk up and sit down. So at this point, what we'll do, I think the posture is we'll let you get set up, and then I think our first question is going to be from Representative Reese. So, Teddy, give me just a second, let everybody get set up, and we'll recognize you. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I believe it's come up more than once. We've got some energy demands on the way, and we know this is the case. And I don't care what they say about the Chinese DeepSeek AI. It doesn't run on a 3-legged hamster and a wheel. It's going to need just as much power as anything else. So I would recommend that most of you don't buy too much into the hoopla. So in that case, Representative, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation today. I am Representative Teddy Reese from Columbus, Georgia, House District 140, and I'm a member of the Special Committee on Resource Management. And thinking about resource management, there certainly is a better time to be concerned about resources than during the time of a natural disaster. So I heard a lot about, these are our lines, Georgia Power, EMCs, MEAGs, the ECGs. Talk about emergency response so we'll understand how that works. Like, is Georgia Power just fixing their own lines like Hurricane Helene just went through? That just tore the southern portion of our state. How do you coordinate on that? Do you think that's the best model? Is this something we should look at? Just give us a little feedback on that, please.
Yes, I'll jump in. I don't do storm restoration necessarily, but I'll let the other gentleman jump in as well. But really, you're right. When we have storms hit our areas, we do a lot of preparation before them when we see the forecast coming. So all of us mobilize the crews that we have of our own companies. But we'll also have, mutual assistance, as we mentioned, between ourselves and the state. But for instance, we also pull a lot of people from out of state. So we've got Georgia Power is part of the Southeastern Electric Exchange, and that's an association of all utilities in the Southeast where if there's storms coming towards Georgia, crews in the Carolinas, Tennessee, they can be mobilized to be waiting for that storm, and we will all work on it together. Obviously, the owner is directing that, but we have great associations, not just within the state. We as Southern Company have, Alabama Power and Mississippi Power crews. But with something as vast as Helene, we had crews coming from San Francisco, Canada. We all mobilized nationally to get those resources here. So we focus on our areas, but if we are in an area, we will work on each other's lines if that's the most efficient. We'll obviously coordinate that. But it is each entity is looking at what it expects may happen in that storm response teams, damage assessment teams once the storm hits, and then we will coordinate. We focus on our own areas, especially at first, but we will coordinate and help each other out. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
I'll just comment real quickly. Georgia EMC and our co-ops, distribution co-ops, very similar to Georgia Power in that respect. So we work together. We have mutual aid agreements amongst all the co-ops, and that's one of the greatest strengths we have with the cooperative world. And so we work out of state as well, but our statewide association coordinates those efforts on behalf of the distribution EMCs. And then, so in the event, we also have been known to work. We have mutual aid agreements with Georgia Power. So when we get our system restored, of course, that's our priority. We will go assist others, and we have worked for other MEAG municipalities and Georgia Power as well.
Mr. Chairman, one quick follow-up, if you will.
Yeah, please.
This is my last question. The infrastructure as it is right now, what's your comment or your opinion on the age of it? Is it aging to where we should be concerned? When we think about this population growth we're expected in Georgia, will the poles need to be replaced? Should we be concerned about the age of the infrastructure we have out there? Are we in a good spot? Just give me your opinion on that.
I'll jump in first, and then others can jump in. From a Georgia Power standpoint, we've been working through with the commission through the last several years on a grid modernization program or a grid investment program where we identified circuits that may not be as reliable as others, wanting to make sure that we invest in those to get them better. Hurricane Helene, we rebuilt massive amounts of this state. I mean, we had more poles and instruments damaged in Helene than we did the prior 3 hurricanes, and so not the most desirable way to rebuild the circuits in the system, but we did rebuild when we did that. But we're also looking at the ITS. All of us see this load growth, and we just filed it in IRP at the commission. We have a lot of new transmission lines that we will build in the state to allow for load growth, the continued transition of the fleet, added renewables, and those types of things. And so there is a focus, at least at Georgia Power, through the last few cases with the commission to go invest in those resources that are older. On the transmission side, we looked at age of those resources. In the 80s and 90s, you had a lot of growth. You continued to replace some of those as load growth came in, and then for about 15 to 20 years, it was kind of stagnant. So we look at transmission assets as they start getting into the end of life, especially on transmission, replace those before there's a failure there. On the distribution investments, it was much more focused on reliability data. If there are circuits that aren't performing to the level that they need to, we've invested in those. And so the commission has allowed Georgia Power to put forth those plans. And that's kind of on the existing system, and then the ITS handles any investments for new things. So I'll let the others speak, but we do have the ability through the commission to invest in those so that they are reliable to serve customers.
And very similar on the transmission side. And on the distribution side, the EMCs in the world are constantly doing pole inspections. And again, that's where the advantage of the Territorial Act comes in, because we're investing billions in upgrades and system upgrades, and helps us plan long-term to make sure that our system is up to date. So we're constantly reviewing and doing maintenance. We look at our outage indices and make sure we're focused on areas where we're problematic or had trouble in the past. But certainly having the ability to focus in that area in which we serve to make sure that our system is reliable for our members is key.
Let me add a little bit of that too. First on the mutual aid agreements, anywhere there's a disaster, and people will say, where do we go when there's a disaster, or who do we talk to? I would say talk to these utilities, and it's across the state, because we deal with disasters every year, right? So we all have mutual aid agreements in across the country, and we've had them for decades. And so we stage people, we'll get people ready to go. When the storm's coming in, we're gonna be ready to go. As far as keeping our systems update, the Territorial Act gives us a priority of our obligation to serve. And so when you look at the reliability numbers that you see in Georgia, that we're all brag about, that in itself tells you how well our infrastructure is in terms of age. So it's a constant renewal every year that we're trying to renew the systems. And technology is changing as well. So we're trying to keep up with technology as well and be innovative throughout the process.
So we've got a hard stop here at 4:30. So I'm going to actually, I know there's a couple other questions. I would ask you to go, please reach out, to reach out offline. But I would like to ask a question or two just myself before we wrap up. One of the things that I've heard specifically between Georgia Power and the PSC is there is times where confidential trade data is not made available to the PSC. And I'd really appreciate if we could shine some light on if that's a factual statement, if that's not a factual statement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what you're referring to is, I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about the current filing that we've got, the current 2025 Integrated Resource Plan, and just how in-depth that is. There will be, some of the information in the filing is redacted as trade secret, and but that is available. Our staff has no issues receiving that information, as well as any of the interveners in the party. They file NDAs and have access to that information. The reason it is trade secret, because it could be considered anti-competitive. It's that type of sensitive information. But no, we don't have any trouble getting all the information we need out of them.
So
and that's what I mentioned, all the data requests. The interveners can file data requests. Staff files hundreds of data requests, and their consultants. But if it is considered trade secret, then it is just noted accordingly, and it's just handled more carefully.
But just to double back and clarify, that information is made available to you.
It is made available to our staff,
Okay.
as well as, like I said, other intervening parties in the case also have access to that information.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure there's no things being hidden. I've actually got one more question before we wrap up. One of the biggest concerns I have that I saw on the statistics that you provided, specifically fuel sources, was as we migrate more and more to be, seems like more dependent on natural gas. I'm reminded of the 2022 rates and how it tripled. And I'm just curious how you all are looking at mitigating that risk, because I mean, if we become ultra dependent on one fuel source, then that kind of opens us up to be subject to whatever the rate of that's going to be. And if you could please just talk about that for me real fast.
Yeah, that what we faced with that extreme spike in natural gas prices, and that's a reflection on how changes on the federal level can have such a drastic impact on pricing, and that was in accordance with some of the changes that were made with regards to energy, being more energy independent, as well as there's just a lot of variables in natural gas pricing. For instance, now if you start exporting LNG, that could put some upward pressure temporarily on pricing. But what we dealt with in that 22 era was unprecedented. I will say this, and if you look at some of the energy mix amongst the Georgia Power and the co-ops and the EMCs, you see some similarities. I will say that you go down to, say, Florida. I'm going to use Florida for example. They are probably more in the lines of around 70% relying on natural gas, whereas we're at the 41% in this case for Georgia Power. So I think we got a pretty good number there. I think you got to be careful as you grow that, because that is a very it's a fuel source that we have a 100-year resource in this country. So it is something that will remain a valid option for producing electricity. But the pricing is, like I said, the federal policies have such an impact on that, and that's why we've got to keep watching that as well. But you just can't build nuclear plants fast enough to meet this growth. That's why natural gas is such a viable option now, because you can build that plant and have it up and running in time to meet the need that we see coming.
And I think you hit the nail on the head about my concern. There's a lot of immediate investment in natural gas combined cycle, gas turbine technology to generate power. But I guess what I'd like to know is there a long-term vision? Because I mean, yeah, we can, supplant some of that with the, those technologies. But what about other options in the thermal fleet? Is there anything else that we're looking at?
Well, there's so many new technologies that are evolving. And for instance, one of the things in this current IRP filing that is unique to prior, I've been through 3 IRPs. And I've never seen so much investment in technology where you're actually taking existing resources and using that technology to really beef up the amount of generation you can get from existing fleets. These guys could go into in depth in that, I'm sure, but that's one of the things. I haven't read the entire filing yet. It was just filed Friday, but that's one of the things that I've really started noticing that's different from prior IRPs is a lot of investment in these technologies that will allow you to get more out of what you already own.
Well, my committee will be digging pretty heavy into some of that, so we look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Parsons.
Well, I just wanted to, if y'all could hold on after, I think we're getting ready to end here pretty soon. There was an EUT member out here that has a question.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that if y'all will hold on, so that, I don't know which one it is, but I want to make sure that person
It's
gets
number
the
3.
chance to ask that question to you. And we don't have to, I think the we probably need to wrap it up, but if, I do want to make sure my EUT member gets to ask that question. Now, if you
Thanks,
oh,
Mr. Chairman.
I want you to ask it after, if you'll go to them after the,
Yes, it'll be super quick.
well, super quick,
promise.
but they may not answer it right now.
That's fine. That way they know to think about it. It's mostly about data centers. Do we have any figures on how much money has been spent to date on data center interconnection and how much of that they themselves have been paying for? Would love to kind of get some insights on sort of costs and future projections.
You want us to answer now?
If you can answer it pretty quickly, yes. I mean, I know we have to get out of the room for one thing.
Yes. The long and short of it is that's very site specific to the data centers that are coming in and the location they select, right? One of the things that we've done very early on in this process with data centers is requiring whatever that cost is for investment that will be put on their site to interconnect them to the system, they pay for that investment up front. So that risk of recovery is eliminated from ever being borne by anyone else but that customer that caused that investment to be created.
All right, thank you. Chairman, it's,
Again, I appreciate you all being here today. This is they say the journey of 1,000,000 miles starts with a single step. So we've got a big lift ahead of us, and thank you for the presentation. And I have no other comments. If you don't either, then I will go ahead and adjourn us.